talk. And now I would like to go through with you with the workflow, involving the import of images into Omero. So for that, I will start my OMERO.insight. Okay. So on my Mac, I'm sitting here on the Mac OS Big Sur, and I have the downloaded OMERO.insight. Now I start OMERO.insight like so, and I can see a splash screen of OMERO.insight. Okay. Now many of you might be in some straits, depending on how successful your downloads were. I hope that the majority, if you put your mind to it, you get there. If you have any doubts and you need some help, of course, the chat is your friend. Jean-Marie will be watching it. Or indeed, in this point, I mean, if you are really completely lost, then just interrupt me, that I should go slower. This is what we call a splash screen of OMERO.insight. The most important part here is now the spanner. The spanner is opening a menu which gives you an overview of the servers you can connect to. There is nothing intuitive about this step, absolutely nothing. You simply have to put in the server address which you were given by some higher power. What do I mean by higher power? Well, I was talking about the system administrator of the server in your institution. That might be what I mean by higher power, or let's say the demo server of the OME team, which you might apply for an account in very easily. And of course, you will get such account. And if you remember the service level agreement, which I just kind of spelled out, basically you have no guarantee of anything on the demo. It's a demo, but you can very well rely on that we will make the best effort to keep it up for you. And you can indeed import images as you see fit, with, again, the caveat that if you import too much, we will stop it, etc. And you can simply lose the data which are on that server. That's why it's only demo. Okay. The list in your own case will be not populated with anything else but the local host. The local host is not the right server. It's not the one you want to connect to. Unless you are a developer, you will never use that address. Instead, you will click on the plus button here under that list and enter a server address. In this case, it will be workshop.openmicroscopy.org. You will please read once more what you typed, just like I do now. If you make a typo, it will be a fatal error for the connection. So please don't make a typo. And once you've done so, you click OK. I will not do so because you can very easily see that I have the address here already in my list, and that's how I added it. Additionally to that, if you are working mainly from work, meaning from an institution which might have some firewalls set up, these firewalls might block the outgoing traffic through the port 4064. The
Peter,
port, yes?
Just people have been already hit by that. There's a typo in the name of the server, it's double N. Just it's mentioned in the chat, and an old person had made the same mistake. Thanks Gleb for the correction. No, it's probably in the sheet itself. Okay, in the sheet that was distributed.
Really sorry about that. Okay, so there is no double N in the address. It should be just open microscopy. Okay. If you now, let's say, go and say apply, then you should be seeing the address here. Okay, this is crucial. If you don't have this right, okay, if you don't have this correctly, if it doesn't say a workshop microscopy, don't even try to do anything else. Don't put your credentials in and press anything. If you don't have this right, it will not work. Okay, so correct all the typos, reread it. There should be no double N. Sorry, really about that typo. I will be using I think, if you can correct me, I'm user 41 in the cheat. Is it so, Gleb? If you can have a quick look for me.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I will be user 41, but you will be your own user, okay? So I'm user 41, and the password is just as Gleb helpfully distributed to you via some channel. I will not say it aloud. And after that, I click login. And as highlighted, I can be either successful. Well, I will be successful because I did it before. I know what I'm doing. But in some of the environments which we don't know, the outgoing traffic through 4064 port might be blocked. And this would cause, after login, just a short pop-up message saying something quite scary, saying something like system failure or something. If you nevertheless, in such case, you would go back to this spanner and type in wss.workshop.openmicroscopy.org/OMERO.ws, as is highlighted here, and go again, such as like so. Okay, you can see that it changed for me. And this new address is basically giving you a side door to the Omero server, which sits here in Dundee and goes around this blockage of your firewall in the institution. Yeah, if this should be the case. But if not, then I can stick to the workshop.openmicroscopy.org, as I will, and I click login. Nevertheless, if you click login and there will be a short message mentioning the words username and password, then you most probably made a typo in your username and password. After I clicked the login button, I can see that I have some data already here as highlighted, and I can now go and import some new data. Don't worry about the name here. You did not log into somebody else's account. That's not so. We don't know your real civic names, and that's why they are not on that server. You have to bear with us and bear for the duration of the workshop a name of a famous scientist, okay, such as Amadeo Avogadro. I click on the import icon, which is the fifth from the left, and this will pop up an Omero Importer. In Omero Importer, I have on the left a browser of my local Mac, and inside that I can now select, let's say, a couple of images. This will be probably some screenshots. I can select one or more images, or I can select indeed a whole folder with images, such as under Pivalcisco, there should be a desktop, and there is a whole folder. I can import and put on the queue this whole folder. If I choose so, like so, I set up to the queue and import a whole folder. I will not do that. That would be too tedious and long. I will instead select those two images only and put them in the queue. Now you can, on the import stage, create a new dataset and project. Dataset and project being two levels of hierarchy of containers, which we have in Omero. Dataset is contained in project, doesn't have to be. An image is contained inside dataset. And no image is contained only under project directly. This could be an option. I can import into an existing project. The list of the existing projects to which I have the right to import is highlighted for me here, basically 2 different projects. And or I have here other data sets which I can import into. I will not do any of that today. Instead, I will show you the new from folder option, which is basically saying create a new data set for me in the Omero server and import data into that data set. And the name of the data set, please take from the name of the folder from which I'm importing from the local environment. And this is, in my case, the folder called desktop. So I add those 2 images into the queue and I say import. And you can see that the import is quite fast because I'm on the institutional network, and it consists of 2 phases. The first phase is an upload, and it's basically the classical copying phase, which I was highlighting on the small cartoon, where the image is getting copied in full from my local Mac, in this case, onto that server. And after that, there is another phase where the metadata mainly are processed, such as the original metadata inside that file, and then put into the relational database, and thumbnails are generated. And this is done on the server itself. Should the import fail for whatever reason, it will be highlighted here, and you can take an error from there and tell us what that is. Nevertheless, of course, in the majority of cases, this will be not the case. I can go back to the main view here, and I can see the newly imported dataset just after I click the refresh button. This is a must. So I refresh the tree. I can see the desktop here, desktop folder, and you can see my 2 humble screenshots were imported. As I indicated, please don't import anything big. It's not worth it. It's not worth the hassle for that moment. This is just a training server. And that would be for the basic imports. So that's how the data, that's how the data were imported. As highlighted, the other data which are here already, as highlighted, we actually use nevertheless for the imports of the data which are already there, the in-place import, because it saves space. So this would be for the OMERO.insight. And now a little bit of a switch. I will leave the OMERO.insight aside and go and check the data in OMERO.web. Okay, for that, I will log out and I will log in again as user 41. Using my browser. So I went to an address called workshop.openmicroscopy.org. Okay, let's do it again on a new tab because that's quite important. Workshop, can you see what I'm typing here? Workshop.openmicroscopy.org. And I just hit enter and I will be logged in already because I just logged in the other tab of my Firefox. But you hopefully understand that is how you navigate to the second client, which was mentioned in my talk previously. And the client is called OMERO.web, and it's a browser-based client, which will enable you to connect to the same server by other means. Other than OMERO.insight, which we just explored. And obviously the desktop folder is here, and I can see that the Amadeo Avogadro is indeed the owner of those images. Okay, let me just show you back in OMERO.insight one more trick. I mentioned you are a facility managers, possibly. So if I start the OMERO.insight anew and log in now as trainer 1, you cannot do that. Yeah, don't log in as trainer 1, please. I can show you that as a user with slightly higher powers in Omero, I can import for somebody else. Okay, so this is somebody else with higher powers called trainer 1, which is now importing. Let say those two screenshots, and I will import them into a new project called for user 41 Amadeo. Okay, so this is the username, and this is the description of that project, saying this is trainer 1 importing on behalf of user 41. Okay, so I can create such new project, and I will select the Amedeo Avogadro here in the drop-down menu. So I have suddenly here two menus in the import location list. I will select this Amedeo Avogadro there, and unfortunately I will have to repeat because I should have done that previously. So trainer 1 for Amedeo, trainer importing for user 41 Amedeo Avogadro. Okay, so after I done that, I put those two screenshots into the right-hand queue, and again the same process goes. I don't worry now about OMERO.insight. I go straight to OMERO.web, and now remember that the agent who was doing the action in the OMERO.insight, as you can see here, who is connected to workshop.microscopy.org is trainer 1. It's not Amedeo Avogadro. But nevertheless, if I refresh here the Amedeo Avogadro's tree, I can see that there is a new project called Trainer 1 for Amedeo, and that project is belonging to Amedeo Avogadro. Also, the dataset underneath is belonging to Amedeo Avogadro. The images inside the dataset also are belonging to Amedeo Avogadro. What we want to say with that is that the trainer 1 was able to do an action in Omero, which is completely on behalf of Amedeo Avogadro, and Amedeo Avogadro now can do things like rearranging those images because they are his, or indeed even delete them because they are his, they are Amedeo Avogadros. So this is the import for another. So trainer 1 just imported images for another user. Okay, so this would be for the first part, for the import of images into Omero. If you have questions on that, or if I should go through something more in depth, I will gladly do so. Otherwise, I will log out and log into OMERO.web again, but this time as trainer 1, and you will stay as you are. Okay,
probably is worth mentioning that it's because if people are running facility, this on behalf is quite a nice feature, but most of the time the import can be done via the command line, and there are similar option as well to do via the command line, because you potentially have, you can put script in place where people put image in a folder and that they get automatically imported on behalf of somebody else. You don't have to do necessarily all of it via the client, via the UI.
Yes, thank you. So if there are no questions, this indeed is quite an important topic. And if you go in depth into that, we can. Now I logged in as trainer 1, and I'm browsing the data in OMERO.web. Now I will concentrate on the data which are already there. We are all, the users in Omero are organized in groups. A user must be a member of at least one group, but it can be a member of as many groups as seen fit by an administrator of Omero. And the groups are highlighted here. We are mainly in the group called Lab 1, and this is a read annotate environment. This means that we can see and annotate each other's data. Now, by default, I am logged in as somebody. I don't have, train one doesn't have this nice name, such as Charles Darwin or Linda Buck or whatever scientist you happen to land on. And instead, it has the first name trainer one and the surname trainer one. And sorry for that, but if yourself, you will be here, let's say Charles Darwin. And this means the person who is logged in. So who is doing the actions here? Whereas on the left top left is also a name, but this in this time it denotes whose data are being viewed in the tree below. So by default, you are viewing your own data just after login. That makes sense. If you want to switch the view of the data on somebody else, such as I would like to view as trainer one the portfolio of Amedeo Avogadro, I can drop down this menu and go to lab one and switch to Amedeo Avogadro. This is user 41, and you can see that I have here the trainer one for Amedeo Avogadro. Yes. Which I just went through. So if I go back to my own data, hopefully you understand now how to navigate to somebody else's data. I can explore them. You can, of course, navigate to your own data. In the first place, the data are very similar, except for that trainer one has a richer assortment of images, projects, and datasets. But the data are similar, but they are not the same data. So let's say if you would delete some data, please don't do that. As I said, what is there is ours and you don't delete that. But you could, and in that case, it would not have any bearing on the other users or on trainer one, okay? Because we all have our own data, is just kind of copies, which are the same for didactic reasons. We just said in the talk that we have a wide range of the proprietary file formats, such as the, let's say, the medical imaging format DICOM with the whole brain CT scan. We have, of course, the conventional microscopy images. These are Z-stacks with the convolutions from the Delta Vision fluorescence microscope. We have the whole slide imaging format SVS. In this case, something like 100,000 by 50,000 pixels big. Nevertheless, we also have in this portfolio the NDPIs, which are more than 100 by 100,000 pixels big. The further formats we are supporting, which are represented here, include time lapses and the screenplay well format here. Now, if I, let's say, select the siRNAi HeLa dataset, I can go and view, click on the images. These are just thumbnails of the images in the center pane. I'm highlighting here, and select an image which has, let's say, more than 40 Z sections and one time point, as is highlighted in the general pane in the right-hand side. So you can see immediately that there are the most important metadata for that image, which were read from the file itself during the import. This was the second blue bar, okay? And the name of the image was taken from the name of the file. In this moment, it is good to mention that we never change the original file. It is stored inside Omero, and if you then later decide to export, don't forget to remind me that I should be showing you export, because this was explicitly asked for on the program of this workshop. If you are exporting the data, which is done by this downward facing button from OMERO.web, you will get the original file in its entirety and intact, and in the format you import it into Omero. This is a Delta Vision file, and that's why after download from Omero, sorry, you will get just the Delta Vision file. You can also export other types. The image ID is a unique identifier inside Omero. We already understand that every object in Omero has an owner, and we were using that feature when we were exploring whose images are those. And we have some other very important metadata, such as the date and time of the acquisition and import, dimensions in the X, Y, and Z sense, whether or not it's a time lapse, the names and number of the channels, which I can, by the way, change by clicking on this button and apply to all, which would change the names of the channels for the whole data set. So data set being this green container. I also omitted to mention that we have also the projects. They are blue, just as in OMERO.web, except that it's kind of blue-gray here. In just as in OMERO.insight, I wanted to say, except that it's kind of blue-gray in OMERO.web here. Okay, so these containers are containing the data sets, which are in turn containing the images. So coming back to the image I'm exploring here, I have here also a ROI count. Now, these are some very important metadata, as I said, that's why they are on the first general pane, but I have also the acquisition pane, and this one is containing the other metadata, which you can download from here, and which were read on the import at the import time from the original file itself. It really contains everything what was there, but in this way, it's a little bit unseemly, let's say. For that purpose, we the bioformat simply scans the original metadata, and if it finds something which matches some scheme we are coming up with, which we call OMERO model, this item will be then recognized, such as model of the detector or type of the detector, and will be written in the relational database, which I mentioned in the talk, and then shown in this much nicer drop-downs, such as for each channel. I have here the excitation wavelength and so on, which are much better to read, like so. Okay, I also have a preview tab here, where there is a preview of that image. I can go through Z sections here, but what I wanted to show you is how to change the channel settings. These are, yes, I just have to go and these are the basically something we call rendering settings, which are adjustable. By adjusting them, I'm not changing the original file. I can, let's say, manipulate the blue channel by driving the slider down, and this changes the maximum displayed intensity. And I can save those new settings on the server, which will change also the thumbnail display here, like so. I can, let's say, go back to where it was. I can switch on and off the channels like so, okay? So for example, if I want to now go and do a quick scientific experiment, imagining that I have a mixture of controls and stainings in a green channel, then I want to explore whether the staining worked in my experiment or not. I will switch off the blue channel here, and the other channels like the first red channel as well, and leave only the green channel on display. I will adjust the display so that I can see the staining on one image. Then I can say save to all, and this will put the same rendering settings on all the images in the data set, which will be seen in the second in the thumbnails of the center pane. And once this is done, I can now see that that I have to, let's say, readjust. That's fine. Like so, it's much better because I didn't do the action on the most yielding image. This looks much better. And I again applied the settings on all, and I can now, let's say, know that the controls are denoted by the word in. So if I select the in the filter according by name, you can see that some of those images are named as in. So this filter is basically filtering out all the non-controls. I can see that the controls are indeed black, which makes me happy as a scientist. And then I go for the word scrum, where I know that these are images which should be stained. Indeed, most of them are stained. This one is not, but that's where my science starts. In this manner, with one click, I can simply compare and decide whether or not my experiment was successful or not. Furthermore, I can now go and, let's say, remove the filter and then go and see what my colleagues did on the same image. Now, these are images which belong to trainer 1. But you can see that many of the people, my colleagues, for example, Elizabeth Blackwell, selected this very image of mine, of trainer 1, and put their own rendering settings on it. I can now select Elizabeth Blackwell rendering settings. I say save to all. And in this manner, I overtaken the Elizabeth Blackwell's rendering settings, which is highlighted also here in this blue thumbnail where trainer 1 is the owner. That's why he's in blue. And you can see that now he or she has already the same rendering settings as Elizabeth Blackwell has on the same image. Elizabeth Blackwell has also her own image on which she has whatever settings she chose. That's completely different matter. So that's how to use rendering settings of another. But let's say I have a look at that and I see, yeah, that's nice, but I would like to have my own rendering settings back. So if I go and say set imported, that's safe, I will go back to the rendering settings, which were there when I started working with those images. Okay, so that would be for, I think, this first part. We wanted to do a break after an hour. This would be probably quite opportune. After the break, we will go through the Omero iViewer, and we will start with Fiji, and then we will make a second break, and we will do the Omero Parade and Figure, and possibly some more analysis using the notebooks according to your interest. Okay, so thank you. I think we will do 15 minutes break, 1-5. This would be on my clock. 22 minutes after the hour, we will reconvene here for the continuation of the workshop, if this is okay with you, ladies and gentlemen. If there are some questions, then this is the time where you please start asking the question. Also with the voice, that's the time where you can simply unmute and ask. Or indeed, if Jean-Marie sees it fit, then he can tell me to show this and that. But otherwise, I wish you a nice break. Okay, I can see a question of Philip Heuser. Same group has the same rights. This means probably the answer is is no, or rather explain what the same group is. Groups of the same type have the same right. Okay, so
so the question is how fine-grained I can set the rights to access to the images. So if two users are in the same group, they have full access to each other's images, or I can...
Right.
Not necessarily. It depends if you put, in the case that Peter has put, they will have access, and sometimes that access can be only read, so they can view each other's data. But in other cases, in the case that we have, they can annotate. In other cases, you can decide the group is private and nobody sees each other's data except the group owner, which most likely will be the PI. He can then see the data of the member of his group, but the group member cannot see each other's data.
Yes, but yes.
Within a given group, let's say if you are in a read annotate group, you cannot decide, oh, in that group, I want Peter to be able to view other people's data and annotate them, and I want Jean-Marie not to be able to do that. Within the same group, that's not possible. Except
if you are a super user. If you are talking, so basically you can't be granular inside the group, if this is your question, Philip. Okay. Yes. So once you are inside the group, you can see these are the 4 types of groups which Jean-Marie just highlighted. We are in this, so it's always good to remember that we are talking about the data of others. So of course, if you are talking about your own data, you can do any type of group, anything you like. But if you data for others, you can see that the amber denotes that I can do quite a bit with the data, but not everything. For example, I cannot delete Jean-Marie's data, so that's why it's called read annotate. The red denotes that I can do very little. I can only view them. I know that Jean-Marie exists and I can view his images. The green means that I can do whatever I like with Jean-Marie's images, also delete them. So that's a read-write group and to be enjoyed with caution. And because here is just one person, this means that the other person even is invisible. So his existence would be a complete mystery to me. I would not understand that he's in the same group. That's the private group.
Okay, and then it's set by the person who creates a group.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So the person who creates group will be an administrator in Omero, either a full administrator, or we have a type of users which we call administrator with restricted permissions. And you can set up a new user which will be kind of restricted administrator in that sense, and that person's job will be to create new groups and users. Okay, that is very often a very typical task, because let's say the IT guy, the system administrator who digs in the Linux guts of the machine itself is not interested in being tasked with that. And that's why you have kind of a mid-level person with modest but non-zero IT skills, let's say, who knows more or less what is happening in the imaging facility, and they can be tasked, of course, person of integrity and sense, who can be tasked with creating new groups and users. Okay, we will not have all the powers of administrator in Omero, and such person will know to go, let's say, to OMERO.web, and here you can very easily create groups and users like so.
Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, not at all.